Imagine waking up one morning to discover that the paper in your wallet is worthless, literally. You can't buy bread, your lights flicker off, and the line at the ATM snakes around the block just so you can withdraw $5 worth of food. This isn't a war zone. It's not a famine. It's Venezuela in 2025. Just 2 decades ago, Venezuela was one of Latin America's richest nations. Today, it's a symbol of economic collapse. What happened here wasn't a natural disaster. It was man-made, a slow-motion unraveling of a nation brought down by years of poor decisions, corruption, and blind ideology. This is the true story of how one of the wealthiest countries in the world became one of its most broken, and why it serves as the ultimate cautionary tale for any nation betting its future on a single resource. 2 decades ago, Venezuela wasn't on anyone's tragedy watch list. It had the world's largest proven oil reserves tucked beneath the Orinoco Belt, over 300 billion barrels, more than Saudi Arabia. Its citizens enjoyed subsidized healthcare, free education, and a thriving middle class. Clinics opened in remote barrios, and modern highways linked once isolated towns. Caracas boasted skyscrapers and luxury malls, and tourism was on the rise. Between 2004 and 2012, oil revenue injected as much as 30% of GDP directly into social programs. Unemployment dipped below 8%, and extreme poverty plummeted to under 7%. Children enrolled in school at record rates, clinics offered free medicine, and confidence in tomorrow soared. But instead of treating oil revenue like a finite gift, successive governments spent it like a never-ending payday. Social programs ballooned, often without audits. Price controls choked private enterprise. Bakeries sold subsidized bread below cost, collapsing the baking industry. Farmers dumped produce because they couldn't cover transport costs under government-controlled pricing. With every boom, cracks in the system deepened. There was no savings fund, no reinvestment in infrastructure. When crude prices plunged from $115 per barrel in 2014 to under $50 by year's end, Venezuela's economic foundation collapsed with staggering speed. Today, hyperinflation has made the bolivar almost useless. Street vendors price goods in dollars or trade electronics for groceries. Over 7 million Venezuelans have fled to countries like Colombia, Peru, and the US, forming one of the largest refugee crises in modern history. Those who remain endure daily blackouts, medicine shortages, and spiraling crime. But this story didn't begin in the 2010s. It started in 1976, when Venezuela nationalized its oil industry and created PDVSA. Overnight, the government took control of one of the most lucrative oil supplies on Earth. Trucks loaded with paychecks rolled into Caracas, funding sweeping social programs and glittering infrastructure projects. By the 1980s, GDP per capita outpaced Mexico's. In 1998, Hugo Chavez swept to power on a populist wave, promising to share the oil wealth with Venezuela's poor. He nationalized industries, cement, steel, telecoms, and poured billions into free clinics and education programs. Poverty fell, unemployment dropped, and it seemed like the Bolivarian Revolution was delivering on its promises. But beneath the success was rot. Chavez fired PDVSA's experienced staff and replaced them with loyalists. He signed opaque deals with China and Russia, borrowed billions, and funneled oil money into political projects. When oil prices soared in 2008, Venezuela earned $100 billion in a single year. But instead of diversifying, Chavez doubled down on giveaways, cheap groceries, near-free gasoline, and direct cash payments. PDVSA's profits vanished into a black hole of corruption and patronage. Economists warned of disaster. Venezuela's import dependency climbed above 70%, including for food and medicine. But instead of saving, the government printed money. In 2011, they expropriated farms, triggering a collapse in food production. Nationalized factories ground to a halt. The bolivar depreciated rapidly. When oil crashed in 2014, the economy imploded. Revenue fell by $60 billion. Reserves evaporated. The government had no cushion. Food, medicine, and even electricity became scarce. Unemployment soared to over 25%. By 2015, oil production plunged below 1.5 million barrels per day. By 2017, it was under 1 million. PDVSA ships were seized abroad due to unpaid debts. Its staff abandoned ship, unpaid, overworked, and defeated. Hospitals ran out of basic medicine. Power outages surged. Water treatment plants failed. And still, the printing presses ran. From 2013 to 2018, Venezuela's money supply exploded from 3.5 trillion bolivars to over 1 quadrillion. Inflation spiraled out of control. Prices doubled every 18 days. Bartering became common. 3 eggs for a bar of soap. A mosquito net for a school book. Stories of despair abound. A doctor performing C-sections without anesthesia. A teacher with no chalk or electricity. A mother selling tamarind candies to feed her baby. A couple pawning their wedding rings for antibiotics. And the psychological toll? It was immense. Trust in government vanished. Fear grew. Suicide rates soared, up over 70% between 2015 and 2018. Speaking out meant risking arrest or worse. Sanctions added pressure, but they weren't the cause. Mismanagement was. Venezuela's disaster wasn't inevitable. Other oil nations survived price crashes. Norway created a $1.3 trillion sovereign wealth fund. The UAE diversified into tourism and finance. Kuwait invested in infrastructure. But Venezuela spent its fortune on political survival. Authoritarianism only worsened things. Protesters were gunned down. Elections became farcical. Opposition silenced. Currency collapsed. Even pets were abandoned. In parks across Caracas, families slept in tents because their homes had no power or water. By 2025, some fragile recovery is visible. Informal markets accept dollars. Remittances help. But real recovery? It remains out of reach for most Venezuelans. The economy works only for those with access to foreign cash. For the rest, survival is still a daily battle. Venezuela's story is a lesson in what happens when a government trades long-term stability for short-term applause. From oil riches to mass migration, from thriving cities to hollowed-out streets, it shows the true cost of misused wealth and unchecked power. So next time a nation discovers vast riches, remember Venezuela. Because the real power of any resource isn't in its abundance, but in the wisdom of how it's used. What lesson should other resource-rich nations learn from Venezuela? Drop your thoughts in the comments. And if this deep dive opened your eyes, hit like and subscribe for more true stories behind the headlines.